So I want to tell you all a little story. The story goes back almost 20 years. When my husband and I were moving here, we had a realtor that we were working with, and this is the old days of buying a house where you would drive to the office of the realtor and you would jump in the back of his or her car, and he or she would hand you a stack of papers and she would say, all right, these are all the houses that we're going to look at today. And then you'd ride around with her. So this particular realtor had an office near this big parking lot. And I noticed it as we drove in. Remember, we're brand new to the area. This is just a house hunting trip. And as we were pulling out of her office and onto this street, I said, what is this parking lot? Because I didn't see any buildings around it. So what is this parking lot serving? And she said, oh, that's the bus to New York City. She said, so there's no station there. There was no bus station, but it's just a great big parking lot. People would drive to it, and then the bus would pull up, you'd get on, and you'd take off to New York City. And I said, well, what about a train? And she said, oh no, there is no rail, there is no train, no subway, nothing like that. If you want to take transportation into the city, it would be the bus. And all the while I'm thinking, I don't understand what the advantage of riding a bus is over driving your car. I mean, a bus is on the same highway, on the same heavily trafficked freeways into the city. So besides not having to drive, not being responsible for driving, why would someone want to take a bus over having their own car? Again, it's the same roads, right? So if there's an accident or if there's any kind of traffic jam or anything, everyone's going to be delayed, right? The cars, the buses, the trucks, the motorcycles, anything that's on the road is going to be delayed. Yes. That much I got right. However, what I learned, and I can't remember how I learned this, whether it was on the bus or driving into the city, what I learned is that while most of the trip into the city is on the same freeways, the narrow parts, in other words, the closer you get to New York, the more traffic you're going to fight because you've got people coming from every direction, right? And they're all funneling into a specific number of bridges and tunnels. So if you look at this map, you can see that New York is a peninsula. And from where we are in Pennsylvania, you travel, of course, eastward, and you have to hit a bridge or a tunnel in order to get into New York. So again, whether you're coming from Pennsylvania or whether you're coming from New Jersey, well, I mean, if you're coming from Pennsylvania, you are coming from New Jersey because you have to travel through there. Everything funnels and narrows to those bridges and tunnels, right? But what I learned is that the closer you get to those and to the city, the more bus-only lanes there are going to be. So you may be in your car and there may be 4 lanes, but you're also in your car with thousands and thousands of other people in those 4 lanes. There may be 2 bus lanes and they're just going right in. So the bus is a great option, okay? Because it does get you there quickly. It does quicker than a car, in other words. It does also save you from having to drive. The buses are very clean. They are very quiet. As a matter of fact, I've gotten on the bus where the bus driver has stood up and turned around and said, here are the rules. The rules are quiet. So you don't hear people talking loudly on their phone. You may hear people talking to one another, but you really don't hear you don't hear any music. There is Wi-Fi on the bus, so if you need to do work, you can. From what I understand, I've never taken a really early morning bus, but from what I understand, a lot of people are sleeping on the bus. And so there is a general respect on the bus for your fellow passengers and the driver. So it's comfortable, it's safe, it's faster, it saves you from driving. Again, you have the ability to work because of the Wi-Fi on the bus, and it gets you where you want to go. Now, it generally goes to the Port Authority bus terminal, and so if that's not where you want to be, you've got to take a cab or the subway or walk to your destination beyond that. But if you're close, then you get dropped off at a fairly close place. But going back to that story, I thought it was insane that there was no light rail from here to there. Because my understanding, and my understanding was correct, there are a lot of people that live in Eastern PA that commute into New York. There are a lot of people that live in Eastern PA that commute into the Philadelphia area, which is also not a hop, skip, and a jump. So recently, I read an article in our newspaper, our local newspaper, the Morning Call, about a study, a feasibility study that's being conducted. And they are talking about bringing a railroad and a light rail back to the Lehigh Valley, connecting us to New York and Philadelphia. So I'd like to talk about that just a little bit, because you may be watching from one of those two cities and thinking, I can't move to the Lehigh Valley. I've got to commute 5 days a week or 3 days a week, and that's just not feasible for me. Let's talk. So currently, from where we are in Eastern Pennsylvania, there's really two major highways that will get you east into New York, through New Jersey and into New York. And that would be 78 to the south and 80 to the north. Both of those, as you can see from this map, may funnel you to the Holland Tunnel. Now from 80, it may take you to the Lincoln Tunnel, and it may even take you as far north as the George Washington Bridge. Now on the far south, there is the Verrazano Narrows Bridge. Now there's a couple of things that you should know about any one of these routes, and that is there are tolls all along those routes. So that's another advantage of the bus. When you buy a ticket, of course, they're paying the tolls, or it's all rolled in. If you're driving your car along any of these routes, at some point you will begin paying a toll. So maybe you aren't one of those millions of people that have already made the move out of New York City to Eastern Pennsylvania. Maybe you have a job opportunity. Maybe you're looking from some other part of the country or even the world and contemplating this job and where you might live. Where's the best place to live in order for me to still have access to my office in New York or Philly? This is really not meant to be a doom and gloom video. It's meant to be something encouraging. So let's talk about this. The highly anticipated feasibility study regarding passenger rail in the Lehigh Valley, which has been in development for years, was unveiled recently. The study identified 5 primary corridors for the reintroduction of passenger rail to the Lehigh Valley, with proposed connections to New Jersey Transit, SEPTA, and future Amtrak expansions. These proposed routes, deemed the most feasible, would utilize Norfolk Southern Railway lines, though presenters cautioned that accommodating freight rail traffic could pose challenges. Passenger rail and freight rail could be challenging. The logistics of that. The 5 proposed routes aim to establish connections to New York City, Philadelphia, or Reading. Allentown to New York City via Hackettstown, that's in New Jersey. Allentown to New York City via Highbridge, which is also New Jersey. Allentown to Philly via Lansdale, and Allentown to Philly via Norristown. And then there's the outlier, which is Allentown to Reading. The study is now accessible on the Lehigh Valley Planning Commission website. I'll drop a link below so you can have a look at that if you want. And it'll soon be available on PennDOT's advancingparail.com site. It outlines the costs, always a cost, we know that. Stuff costs money. And it outlines those costs involved, and it also outlines the necessary steps to bring such an enormous project to fruition. It estimates a project lifestyle of 10 to 12 years. So this is not something that is going to happen by the end of this year or even next year. Key steps include identifying a project sponsor, conducting further feasibility and alternative studies, assessing the impact on partner railroads, we already talked about that, and advancing conceptual engineering. Public reaction to the study was varied, with some expressing concerns about the lack of high-speed rail inclusion and its competitiveness with other modes of transport. Others, including the Lehigh Valley Coalition for Appropriate Transportation, lauded the progress made and advocated for station locations in downtown areas with easy access to bus routes. So again, you get off the train and you're not exactly where you need to be, so how do you get to exactly where you need to be? Again, bus, taxi, now we've got Uber, and of course, Subway. Elected officials voiced support for improved rail transit, citing the benefits for tourism, commuters, and economic development. The Allentown mayor, Matt Turk, highlighted the collaboration between the State Transportation Department and the LVTS, but also questioned the public value of the proposed rail service, noting that a full ridership demand analysis is pending. Despite challenges, officials remain optimistic about the prospects for passenger rail in the Lehigh Valley, emphasizing the importance of this study in moving the project forward. Pennsylvania, as previously outlined, has a vision for inner-city passenger and freight rail. Actual passenger service has been absent from the region since 1979, despite the existing rail network. Remember, we have talked a lot about the industrial roots of Allentown, of Bethlehem, of Easton, of all of the suburbs here. You know, this was a coal, cement, steel making region. And so there's a lot of rail already laid. How do we utilize that in moving passengers? How much of that is actually usable? Or how much of it needs to be demolished? How much of it needs to be refurbished? These are all good questions. And while I haven't read the study from cover to cover, I think it's very optimistic and I am really excited about this prospect. As a matter of fact, they've gotten so popular that there's a second company now traveling Easton to New York. For years, it was Transbridge. I'll put a link below. You can check out their website, where you can start, and then the different places that you can stop. And they were the only player in town. But recently, within the last 6 months, another nationwide company called Flixbus has started routes to New York City. Right now, they only have 2 pickup stops in the Lehigh Valley. That's Allentown and Easton, but you can get to Newark Airport and you can get to Port Authority in Manhattan on Flixbus. So I would love to begin a discussion on this. If you are from the Valley and you've seen this study and you're curious about it, or if you're living in New York City and you are thinking about getting out and wondering, how am I going to get back to my place of work? Call, text, or email me if you are considering a move to the Lehigh Valley. It's a great place to live, and I think that this is evidence that it's getting even better.